People have asked me, weren't you afraid? Yes, I'm terrified. But solving these problems is what keeps me going, right? It's what keeps the fear sort of at bay. My voice will not always be here. And as someone who processes the world out loud, that was a problem to solve. This disease is going to take so much away from me. I didn't want to let it take that away from me, too. Where do I sit in this conversation? And I get very emotional thinking about it. We take so much away with this disease. I don't want to be taken out of the equation entirely. I want to be in the driver's seat at all times. The fear is never gone. The fear is always there. The terror is always there as to what's to come.
My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. David, you've spent years helping health systems think about patients, public health, and the future of care. Then, in December 2024, you were diagnosed with ALS and became the patient inside the system you had spent your career trying to improve. Since then, you built Talk to Me Goose, an app designed to help people with ALS preserve their voice, stay connected, and keep telling their story even as the disease takes things away.
That's right, Tim. First of all, thank you for having me today. It's really an honor to join you and Troy to share a little bit about what I've been up to. I've followed your work and the guests that you've had on, and it's a real privilege to join you today. I spent, I guess, the better part of 22 years working to make the health system a little more patient-friendly, a little more accessible, hopefully a little more affordable for people to get access to throughout my career. And never did I imagine I would find myself designing experiences for myself. But 2024 was kind of a weird year for me. As I started the year, coming off of what I think was probably my healthiest year. I was an avid cyclist, always looking for opportunities to get out on my bicycle and ride as far and as fast as I could. 2023 saw me go to France and spend 7 days in the French Alps, and I was probably at the peak of my fitness. And I started 2024 getting ready to ride across Britain, but something wasn't quite right. My body wasn't responding the way that I expected it to. And I began this journey through the health system of trying to figure out what the heck was going on with me. And so I got to see lots of different parts of the health system from the inside and figure out what was going on with me, why my body wasn't responding the way that I expected it to. I wasn't really experiencing, I think, exactly the classic signs of what one might consider to be ALS. And I kept getting dismissed, I think, and sent on from one specialist to the next, as I think a lot of people with this disease do. And until I finally ended up in December at Mass General, getting, I think, a presumptive diagnosis of ALS at that point in time. Sort of confirming, I think, by that point, something I had probably figured out for myself. I had already known, since everything else had been rolled out, that this was the journey that I'm on. And thankfully, my progression seems to be pretty slow, but this is indeed the journey that I'm on. And now I've taken on a couple of new challenges, I guess, in trying to make this experience that we all have a little bit better. For people living with this disease who lose the ability to speak, which is one of the first things that started to happen to me that convinced me that this was indeed probably ALS and not something else.
Before any of that, when you first noticed something was wrong in early 2024, what did you tell yourself it probably was? Did you tell your family something different?
I don't know that I told myself anything really. At first, I thought it was viral. We came off of the pandemic and all experienced a lot of strange things coming out of the pandemic. And I think even my physician thought there was something viral going on with me. And I probably did have something viral in early 2024. And we were trying to chase that down. But I showed up to my physician's office with some strange twitching. And she was sharp enough to know that maybe she should do a neurological exam. And she identified that I had some weird reflexes, which have since then only gotten weirder. I'm great fun at parties now, I guess. And so, did I convince myself? I don't know if I convinced myself or thought that there was something else going on, but I do know that as we were searching for, in particular, as my speech started to be impacted, which thankfully you may not notice, but when I get super tired, my speech slows down and I slur my S's. I do know that as I was being rolled into my probably third or fourth MRI machine, I think I had in my mind that this might be the journey that I was on. And I do remember hoping in the strangest sort of way that, maybe there might be, a tumor, which is a very odd thing to hope for. But knowing that this could be, at that point in my mind, knowing this could be ALS and that they wouldn't find anything in that MRI if it was, I was actually kind of hoping that they might. And when I saw the results, I've often told people sort of somewhat jokingly that you get told all your life, how remarkable you are. And when I saw the results, that the results of my brain MRI were wholly unremarkable. I didn't know quite what to make of that, that I was now here on paper in black and white, an unremarkable person with an unfortunate diagnosis at this point. I think by the time I got to Boston, I pretty much had reconciled for myself that this probably was motor neuron disease, ALS. And the exam that the physician in Boston gave me, I think as soon as he started to do, and it was really the first time, that somebody had put their back into the neurological exam and gave me a thorough exam, that I realized that, this wasn't all in my head, that this really was, the diagnosis that I was wrestling with, that it was clear that something was going on with me and that this was really ALS. My wife and I had already had a conversation that this was probably the path that I was on. We've been pretty open with one another throughout. The only person I think who I hadn't really shared was my mom. I think my mom was someone I waited to tell until I had a little more clarity and I could actually be with her and have a good conversation. I didn't want to share something without more news from a physician and without the opportunity to be with her face to face.
When the doctor said ALS, what was the first normal thing you did after leaving that room?
Yeah, so I got my diagnosis in early December of 2024. And I think the first thing I asked them, and I asked the physical therapist, is, well, can I go out and ride my bike? And if so, for how long? And how hard can I go? And they cautioned me about going too hard. And I think we had a very funny conversation. They said, well, how much do you want to ride? And I said, well, I'd like to go ride as hard and as long as I'm able. And they said, well, how much do you usually ride? And I said, well, I just got back from riding 1,000 miles over 9 days. And they said, well, I think you can go as long and as hard as you want. So I called some friends, and we had our partner meeting in Las Vegas about a week later. And I called some friends and I said, hey, I have some news, and I'd really like to get together with you all, and it'd be great if we went to Vegas a day early and met up and rented some bikes and maybe went for a ride through Red Rock Canyon. I've never done it, but it's supposed to be a beautiful ride. And only one of them was able to make it out a day early, but she and I rented bikes and we went for about a 50-mile ride through Red Rock Canyon, and it was just a beautiful ride. And I still could put her in the hurt locker going up the hills in Red Rock Canyon and enjoy the beautiful canyon. It was a wonderful day. It was a little bit chilly, but it was just nice to be out on the bike again and riding up the hills and knowing that I could still do that and knowing that one day I won't be able to. And actually, I think those days of riding up the hills have come and gone. But that was really the first normal thing that I did, and it felt good to be out on the bike and go for a nice long bike ride with a friend and enjoy the time outside and in the desert and in the hills. That was lovely.
Who was the hardest person to tell?
Yeah, the hardest person to tell, Tim, was my mom. My mom. I lost my dad 25 years ago. Actually, 25 years ago this year. He passed from lung cancer, and I think I've been my mom's kind of ally since then. And she just turned 80 just turned 80 on Saturday, and I've been kind of her rock since I lost my dad 25 years ago, and so she relies on me for a lot, and so I was very worried about having that conversation with her, and I did not certainly want to give her this news on the phone. So Ann and I planned a trip out to see her in Phoenix, and wanted to spend some time with her. So we actually booked a trip. My mom had never been out of the country before, so we booked a trip to take her on a journey around the British Isles on a cruise, and gave that to her for Christmas that year and said, we're going to come out and visit you in January. She was a little confused as to how I had all of a sudden all this time off from work, but I told her not to worry about this. And I showed up at her house in January, and I just sat down and I told her what was going on. And, I told her that this is the way life goes, and I'm going to be here for as long as I'm able, and I'm going to continue to care for her as long as I want. And of course, she gave me an ultimatum that I'm not allowed to go before she does, which, none of us control those things. But I am continuing to be grateful that, again, my progression is slow, and we've got the right support structure around our family that mom's going to be well taken care of regardless of what happens. But she continues to be a vibrant 80-year-old. She's out on a road trip with her friends, which always gives me a little anxiety. She's packs up the car and gets in the car and goes on these long road trips, enjoying life as one is wont to do. But that was the hardest conversation I think I've had in my life, was to sit down and tell my mom that this is what I'm dealing with. And we're super close, but she's doing okay.
As the diagnosis became practical, what changed first inside your house after the diagnosis?
Yeah. Well, we tried not to change a whole lot in the house. Thankfully, we've been in this house 10 years, and when we built it, we put in an elevator. That was probably a stroke of genius at the time, but we realized it was easier to do that when we built the house than have to do it later, and we figured we'd be here until they carried us out feet first. Plus, when we built the house, Ann's father lived not too far from us, and he was approaching 90. And we thought if we ever wanted to have him spend any time here with us, it was better to have the elevator than not. And so we're thankful that we have the elevator. I'm also thankful that I don't have to use it every day at this point. I still make my way up the stairs, even as hard as that is. I feel like that's a challenge I like to take on. It gets harder every day, but I'm going to take that challenge on as long as I'm able. But just recently, I've been finding it harder to sit up in a chair and continue to be productive. And so I spent a long time complaining about what position felt most comfortable and trying to find the right position. Could I sit at a desk, sit on the couch, sit at the dining room table? Which position would the laptop be in to be productive, to keep doing what I want to be doing, to work on the app that I've built? And we looked at gamers chairs, and then Ann found this wonderful person in Michigan who creates these custom ergonomically correct workstations. So I've now taken over the dining room with an ergonomic workstation that allows me to work in a reclined position. And I think frankly, it's a little hideous looking, but, and I'm grateful to Ann that she's given me the dining room. I told her we could put it in the basement, and she told me she wasn't going to put me in the basement. So I'm grateful that she's not going to put me in the basement. But so now I get to work in the dining room in a chair that actually will evolve with me over the next several months, and hopefully years, but allows me to work in a comfortable position and takes the strain off my neck as my head seems to get heavier.
I have families call me. Maybe I guess it depends. Sometimes it's whatever 3 in a week, and sometimes it's none for a month. But I have families call me and they'll say like, "Hey, any suggestions or something like that?" Normally, it's people who are newly diagnosed, and one thing I always suggest is like try and stay one step ahead, like technology wise and comfort wise. Like before you need a wheelchair, get a wheelchair that you like and is comfortable and the right size and the right, and before you need an elevator, if you can afford it, get one. If you can't, have your move your master down to the first floor and all that stuff. You got, I don't know, I guess we'll call it lucky. You got lucky or you did it all. You did it all a step early, right? Maybe 2 steps early.
Yeah, Troy, I have said all along, even from the very beginning, that I have been so lucky in so many ways. I've been lucky in so many ways, and we this house is set up from the beginning when we built it. We said, we're not getting any younger, and let's set this house up for us to be successful in for the rest of our lives. And our bathroom and the master bathroom is set up for us to be able to, when we built it one day to roll a wheelchair into the shower. And well, I guess that's going to be, easy for us to do. And, we did do a bathroom renovation last year anyway. And when we did it, we went ahead and put in, grab bars. And we have been ahead of it, whether we probably knew it or not. And there are other things that we'll have to tackle. But, I'm also lucky that we're fortunate enough that, I did have a very successful career at Deloitte, and we're able to take these things on now as we need them. And, it makes me think about, so many people out there who haven't, the great fortune of having had a career like mine to be able to do these things. And that's why I've jumped into the advocacy work that I've done and the volunteer work that I've done, is because I just feel so fortunate to be where I am, that I feel a responsibility to do some of the things that I'm doing, because so many people just don't have the kind of resources, and this is such a terrible disease to have to tackle when you don't, and that just makes me feel compelled to do something about it.
When did you realize your voice might not always be there?
Yeah, aside from the twitching, that was really the most annoying thing that was going on throughout the course of 2024, and the realization as I was cycling in Britain in the fall that my feet were somehow not just naturally going into the pedals the way that they should. In October and November, I started having issues with my speech slowing down at the end of the day. And, as a consultant, my job was basically to talk all day. I would get on the phone in the morning with my teams. I would go to meetings with clients and with my teams. I would tell stories to clients. That's what I say I would always do. And sometimes clients even believe them. And at the end of the day, I found myself where I just felt like my face was super fatigued, and I couldn't get the words out with the kind of ease that I was used to. And I even had a senior manager with whom I was super close and working quite a lot say to me one day, it's as if your tongue can't keep up with your brain. And I was feeling it at the end of every day. And, at that point, I knew something was desperately wrong with my speech. And I had a conversation with my primary care physician, who is just absolutely wonderful. And she has been amazing throughout this entire journey and continues to be. And I made an appointment with her late in the day so she could actually see what I was experiencing, because I did feel like many physicians that I was engaging with were not taking it seriously, what I was experiencing. I had one physician literally say to me, "I don't appreciate anything different about your speech." It was the first time I had met him, and I said to him, "Well, I appreciate that you and I just met, so I don't know how you would appreciate anything different about my speech." I'm telling you there's something going on. And you may not hear it, but I slur my S's more than I certainly used to. And so this realization that my speech was slowing down and I was struggling to maintain my effort throughout the day, and I would sound by the end of the day like I had been drinking and struggling to get words out, was a big realization that my voice will not always be here. And as someone who processes the world out loud, I problem solve by working through issues, verbally. That was a problem to solve. And once a consultant, always a consultant, right? I work through problems out loud. I talk through issues with my teams. I process through ideas by talking them out, and that struck me as a big challenge to overcome. And I know there are other people out there that do the same. And so this became for me a very prominent problem, if you will, to solve. If you think about these things as barriers to overcome or as issues to resolve, and it struck me as a near term issue that I could focus on trying to find a solution to. And when I looked at what was available, what people use, I looked at the tools that were available, and I was a bit disappointed with the solutions that I found. And I thought there must be something available that could better meet my needs in the near term. And I couldn't find anything. And that's what motivated me to get started on trying to build something that I thought might better meet my needs, and then hopefully might better meet the needs of many other people as well.
The diagnosis also reversed your professional perspective. You spent years advising health systems on patient experience. When you became the patient, what did you realize you had not fully understood?
I spent years talking to physicians and health system leaders and executives and others about the importance of empathy, the importance of putting the patient at the center of the experience. And as a consultant, advising, talking to clients, talking to these folks, I could make that case. And to me, it seemed natural. It seemed like the right thing to do. And it seemed like the clients that I was talking to understood that was the natural way of moving forward. And then as a patient, when I found myself navigating through this diagnosis, it became very clear to me how hard that is for physicians and how hard that is for many health systems to do, and how much work there is to do in that arena still. There were many cases, many times as I was experiencing my journey through 2024, where I would get so frustrated and I would lose sight of the fact that all those times when I would counsel. In fact, I remember talking to physicians and presenting at conferences and saying, you have to remember that the experts coming through the door every day are the patients. The ones who know the most about what's happening with them are the ones who walk through the door, and forget that you have that degree hanging on your wall. You have to stop and listen and empathize with the person who's walked through the door, because they're the ones living with what's happening to them. And I would get so frustrated. And my wife said to me, why are you so angry? And it was because I was not being listened to. And she said to me, after several visits with physicians who were clearly not listening to what was happening to me, that she was observing that I would just go in and I would give more and more and more information because these physicians were not hearing. She said, you're used to walking into the room and being considered an expert. You're a partner at a prestigious consulting firm. You have teams that when you walk into the room, they stop what they're doing and they listen because you are the leader, you're the expert, and they listen to what you say. and you've walked into a room now where suddenly you are no longer the expert and the physician is the expert. And I was like, yeah, that's a problem, right? That's the thing I have been working my entire career in some respects to change. And ultimately, when I got to Boston, what I saw was that flipped, was that actually these esteemed doctors, these actual like leading experts in the field of ALS did listen. They did hear exactly what I was experiencing, and they spent the time to actually understand what I had been through for the entire 12-month period leading up to that. And then they engaged, and that, I mean, I broke out in tears in that exam, not because of the diagnosis, because I think I had already gotten there in my head, but because they had heard me, because they had listened, because they had done all of the things that for my entire career I had been counseling physicians and health system leaders and executives that they should be doing, right? Listening to the patient, empathizing with the patient, understanding what they're going through, and delivering that kind of an experience. And so I think to answer your question, Tim, is, I didn't really understand how hard that was for physicians and others in the health system to execute on. And I wish I had a better appreciation as a consultant for how hard that is to execute on, because I think I could have been more effective ultimately in my job. Maybe it takes an experience like this to learn that. But I do remember I followed up after my visit with an email to the Healy Center, applauding them for the experience that I had, and telling them, and I've been studying this for, the better part of 20 years, what really matters to patients and why, what really matters to patients in those moments that matter is exactly what I experienced there. Was somebody who listened, somebody who heard me, somebody who empathized, and then somebody who was an expert in their field who could explain to me what was happening. And they delivered a remarkable patient experience. And so I've been working my entire career to deliver on that. And I think what I finally understood is how hard it is to deliver that in real time. And so, in retrospect, I wish I had a better understanding of that throughout my entire career. Maybe I could have done more, or maybe not. I don't know, but it's just so much more work to do in the health system to deliver on that experience that needs to be delivered on for people, because we're falling short.
Yeah, that Healy Center, the way that the level of patience and communication skill there is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's over the top. It is what I was striving to make happen across the entire system of the US. And, I think I underappreciated how hard it is to deliver.
That emphasis on listening goes back even further. You came from theater before business. What did theater teach you about people that healthcare never could?
Well, I think building on this last answer a little bit, one thing that we learned in theater is how to listen. Right? One thing they teach you, I wasn't an actor, but one thing they teach you in theater is how to listen and how to tell stories. My entire career was built on storytelling, but storytelling is a two-way street, right? You tell stories by listening to your audience and engaging with them, and I always tell people that executives don't make change happen in their organizations unless they really believe emotionally in the outcome. And so my job as a consultant was to listen to my clients and understand what they really needed, but also to motivate them to change and to engage. To motivate them, you have to engage them emotionally. And so you do that through storytelling, and that's theater at the end of the day. And theater, is about listening. It's about engaging emotionally. It's about connecting. And you do that through storytelling. You do that through listening. And that's, that's kind of at the heart of what we're trying to build today with the new business that we're building is, a business built on storytelling. It's a business that enables people who, on the one hand, lose the ability to speak, to be able to continue to tell their own stories, give them their voice back, give them the ability to tell their own stories and connect with others on a human level. And then through the other products that we have, to be able to enable people to connect with others through storytelling. And I think that's really important. It's kind of been a core thread of who I am as a person. Storytelling's been really important component of my life. It's enabled my success as an executive, but it's also, I think it's who we are as people. It's how we actually create culture. It's how we connect people as individuals. And so now it's kind of been the mission of what I seek to do with our new company as well.
When you retired from Deloitte, what part of your old identity was hardest to let go of?
When I left the firm, when I stepped away from the firm after my diagnosis in early 2025, I remember thinking to myself, what the heck am I going to do every day? So I loved engaging every day with my team. I had the privilege to work with some of the most amazing people. I always would say, it's the most amazing people on the planet that I got to engage with every day. People who were so talented and so smart. And we had the opportunity to do some of the most amazing things to make an impact on our clients, on our communities. It was a privilege to get to do what I got to do. And the hardest thing for me was to think about getting up in the morning and coming down the stairs and not having that team to engage with every day. And that really worried me, and not having that team around to lean on, and to engage with, and to prosecute ideas with, and to ask questions of. And, as I got into building Talk to Me Goose, to even just solve problems with, was incredibly hard. It felt really isolating and lonely. And so, I found myself reaching out and engaging with folks when they would have time, whenever I could. And then I found myself back in the office occasionally just to, catch up. And now I have, a wonderful group of partners who get together about once every other month or so for dinner. And that, that's been lovely, but that team component has been the hardest to let go of. And so I'm thrilled now that we have, the opportunity, as we're building this new company, that I'm building a team again. And, it's not certainly of the size and scale that I had at Deloitte. We were the world's largest professional services firm. There were always, a lot of people around. It was a huge team, but it's still an amazing opportunity to build a team. And, we've got a new CEO coming on board in the next month. And we've got, an amazingly talented business development leader who just joined a month ago, or month and a half ago. And so, this opportunity now to build a new team and to start to have folks that I can engage with is amazing. And because that part of what I had was the hardest thing to walk away from every day. It was really excruciating those first few weeks when I came down the stairs and sat on the couch and it was me and the dog. And, the dog just doesn't really know how to work through a methodological problem solving exercise very well. And she doesn't do great at the whiteboard. And Anne, is wonderful, and she's an amazing artist, and she can listen to me rant and rave about a lot of things, but, having a team of problem solvers around who are willing to engage with me, it was hard to step away from. And so it's great that now Anne and I are building this new company, and we have a team, and we don't have to rely on the dog as much. Is wonderful.
The dog, though, likes you more than any of your clients did. That's for sure.
Oh, 100%, Troy. Absolutely. As long as I make sure I feed her on the dot at 5:15 in the evening, everything is good.
You had no coding background, but built the first version of Talk to Me Goose in about 80 days. What happened in those 80 days and where did the idea come from?
Well, there were a lot of mistakes that happened in those 80 days. There were a lot of laughs and a lot of successes. The idea came from this. When I first, again, once a consultant, always a consultant. When I first, evaluated the landscape of the tools that were out there, and I was disappointed with what I found. What I found was that most of the tools out there still rely largely on voice technology that is, by and large, robotic in real time. And I was looking for a solution that could integrate the 11 Labs voice clone that you use, Tim, in real time in a mobile text to speech app. So I didn't sound like a robot, recognizing that it's not always perfect, but that was sort of problem number one. Problem number two was, could I close the awkward pause? Could I leverage artificial intelligence to reduce the amount of time it takes to generate text and reduce the amount of typing that has to take place by using generative artificial intelligence to generate text using so that the user can type less and say more. So with very little input, and perhaps given a tone of voice in the topic area, could we generate input with a small amount of text so that a user could stay more engaged in the conversation in real time and close that awkward pause that might happen when someone has to type what they want to say. And you're very familiar with this, Tim, as you use an eye gaze device. And so that was problem number two. And then problem number three was, can we cut down on the time it takes for someone to get access to a device and reduce the cost of that device and make it available on devices that people already have, consumer grade devices that people already have typically in the homes, iPads, Android devices, Windows solutions that they already have available to them in their home without having to go through the healthcare system, and make it available hopefully for free. And so that was sort of the mission that I set out on. And the impetus for this really was, to be perfectly candid, a YouTube video that I saw. It was a Conan O'Brien episode. It was a podcast that Conan O'Brien did with this beautiful couple, Jules and Maria. Jules is living with ALS. They have a podcast themselves called, they had the Couples Shift. And he talks about the awkward pause, and he talks beautifully about what happens when people disconnect as he's trying to type what he wants to say, or how they behave around him when he's doing that. And it just really struck me that this is an opportunity to potentially use AI to close that awkward pause. And they talk about the value of the 11 Labs voice clone that they got and how it made each of them feel when they could hear his real voice as a synthetic clone. And so I got to work. I took a class. I figured I could teach myself how to do this. What did I have to lose? Nobody would know if I failed. And I got started. And when I had a prototype in my hand and it worked, I just kept iterating on it, and it kept getting better. And then I released it early on March of 2025, and I got a few users giving me feedback, and it snowballed from there. And we struck up a relationship with the Live Like Lou Foundation to make it available to people living in North America with ALS. And last week we gave it away to our 125th family for free. And I'm thrilled with what we've been able to do with it. And we'll have to get you onboarded to it so you can give it a try as well.
Yeah, we're gonna test it out.
Yeah, happy to show you on the webinar here if you'd like, or the podcast webinar. So I'm so corporate on the podcast here, if you'd
Totally
like.
broke you.
Indeed. So yeah, so I'm thrilled with what we've been able to do, and my objective really is to nudge the status quo a bit, if nothing else, right? So how do we drive some innovation into this space and make the solutions better for everybody. Because I do think this is an area ripe for innovation. And I think we've been asking people to settle for far less than what's possible for far too long.
David, you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording, almost like with predictive speech, like when you're texting with someone back and forth and the phones are now starting to suggest things for you. There's kind of a balancing act between helping make communication easier while also talking for the person. Does your app do kind of suggested communication, and how do you toe that line?
So the app does predictions in two ways. It does text prediction, not just predicting next word, but next block of text prediction. So as you're typing, it will predict the next block of text based on it picks up your intention from the first few words that you type, and it will generate 3 predictions of what it believes your next block of text will be that you can select from or ignore and keep typing. So if I type hello, it will pick up and might pick, how are you today as the next block of text, which you can select and then keep typing from there. So it does text prediction based on that to eliminate you having to type the rest of that sentence. It also does text suggestions. So with a very limited amount of input, a topic area and a tone of voice, it will do text suggestions. So for example, the example I like to give is if you're cold, and instead of just typing I'm cold, if you give it a topic area like warm and friendly and an everyday need in this case, and you type I'm cold, it might suggest, hey, when you have a minute, could you get me a blanket? I'm feeling a little bit chilly. And you could select that. And it will suggest 2 short, 2 medium, and 2 long suggestions based on that, which you can choose. And in the new version, when you choose them, if it's not perfect, it will actually repredict based on what you select. So that reprediction actually starts to get, in my mind, closer to what you might have typed otherwise. We realize that the first choice of the text suggestion might be what we call a satisficing choice. It's not what you would have typed, but it satisfies because it's close enough. With the reprediction, the next suggestion might be closer to what you would have typed, and since it repredicts quickly, you might actually continue to get closer to what we would call optimal. So the text suggestion feature, or Merlin in this case, is the AI agent, is meant to help by getting closer and closer to that optimal suggestion. So that's the idea, is with very little text, it creates text suggestions. And then the feature that you asked about, Troy, just to close it out, that I have very strong opinions about, against at this point, is listening. Everybody asks me about adding ambient listening to the solution. Well, why don't we just add, in my terminology, add ears to Merlin and let Merlin listen to a conversation and make suggestions based on what it hears. I'm very much opposed to that at this stage because the feeling that gives me is it takes me completely out of the conversation and just replaces it with an AI. And I have very strong feelings about that, removing agency from the person. And I never want anyone to feel like the solution removes their agency. In fact, the solution is meant to enhance their agency and not remove any of it at any point in time. So I pushed back on any suggestion that we should add listening to it at this point in time, but it's been a point of some vigorous discussion in the past. I'm quite opposed to it at this point, though.
Is it too Black Mirror or Twilight Zone-y for you?
A little bit. I think at this point, if we turn on the listening capability, which I think technically is feasible and not that hard, then where do I sit in this conversation? And that I get very emotional thinking about it. We take so much away with this disease. I don't want to be taken out of the equation entirely. I want to be in the driver's seat at all times. The AI is meant to help. It's not meant to remove me from the equation. And I feel very strongly about that.
I use 11 Labs voice cloning because of ALS. So this is personal for me. What did voice cloning give you that ordinary text to speech could not?
When I first realized that I would lose my ability to speak at some point, and I still assume that I will. I just don't know when. This was the first thing that I thought of, was that I remember, the Stephen Hawking robotic voice. And so I searched to see what the solutions were. And I made a voice clone with one of the voice cloning technology providers initially. And it sounded very much to me like a flat robotic sounding version of me. And I wasn't yet aware of the 11 Labs option. And so I thought, if this is the best that we can do in 2024, I was surprised. And so then when I found that video that I was talking about, the Conan O'Brien episode, and I still sort of giggle that my entire journey was kicked off by Conan O'Brien, that
Pretty funny.
the inspiration is Conan. Really not Conan. It was just the episode that Jules and Maria were on. And they had the 11 Labs voice. I thought that's exactly what I was looking for, was something that sounded much more naturally like me. And I made my very first voice clone. And I did it by me reading, which was the wrong thing to do, because it sounds very much like what I call, podcast David. And it's very serious. It's very formal. But then I made my professional voice clone, and I thought this was what I was looking for, because I wanted to sound like me. I wanted to sound like I normally do. And I don't know that it sounds exactly like me, but again, I come back to the idea that this disease is going to take so much away from me. I didn't want to let it take that away from me, too. And I shared it with a friend of mine who said, shared a voice message with her, and then told her it was a voice clone. And she said she would send money to Africa to have that David ransomed back for me. And I thought, okay, we're on to something here, because my voice is the way that I process the world. And I didn't want to sound like a robot processing the world out loud.
When you heard your clone voice speak back to you, did it feel comforting, strange, painful, or something else? When I first heard my voice cloned, I couldn't stop smiling.
The funny thing about all of this, I suppose, is that whenever I hear myself recorded, even in past recordings, I really don't like the way that I sound. So I don't know exactly how I felt about it, other than it did sound like me, and it sounded as annoying as I think I sound all the time. Where I think, is that really the way that I sound? But it is the way that I sound. So it felt like me, and it felt like what I was looking for. It felt like I had solved the first problem that I needed to solve, and I could move on to the next one. And the people have asked me, Tim, I think, weren't you afraid? And I have to answer the question all the time. I'm like, yes, I'm terrified. But solving these problems is what keeps me going, right? It's what keeps the fear sort of at bay. Because if I wasn't solving these problems, if I wasn't doing these things, then what would I have left is but to be terrified, and the fear would paralyze me, and I'm not paralyzed yet. So it's ticking these things off, like that I'm doing, and solving these problems and tackling these things that I'm tackling, that keeps me moving, even as moving gets harder. And the the fear is never gone. The fear is always there. The terror is always there as to what's to come. I know it's going to be there. But if I wasn't doing this, that would be the thing that would be overwhelming. And I can't afford that.
When I was first diagnosed, everything was about voice banking. For our listeners, that's where you record yourself talking into a tape recorder or a computer with the intent to use that phrase later when you can no longer talk. What was one sentence you wanted to save in your own voice before it was too late?
See, I think maybe this was my problem, and the reason I needed to find a voice clone. I have no idea what I would save. And when I first got all the paperwork and they talked about voice banking, I thought to myself, what would I record? I have no idea what I would record. That's why the voice clone to me was so important, because I would just record the wrong things. That's what I kept thinking is what, yes, I want to record, myself telling my wife that I love her, but I do that in so many different ways that one way to do it, what is the right one way to do it? I kept thinking about these things when I read about voice banking, and I thought, I'm going to do it wrong. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to record the wrong message. I'm going to have the wrong set of recordings, and I'm going to be limited to some subset of things that I say. So the voice clone has to be for me the right answer, because I'm still going to be here, and I just want to be able to say what I want when I want in my voice. And so it was really hard for me to think about, and it still is. And I'm thankful that I still have my voice, even though my speech is a little bit impacted. I still don't have anything recorded. Maybe I just can't make a decision. I don't know. But that's why the voice clone for me was so important, Tim. And we don't have kids, so I think I don't have things to leave behind in terms of those kinds of memories. But I don't know. Maybe I can't make a decision. I can't figure out the things that I want to say that are that specific to put down in a voice bank. I just want my voice to be here in some way, shape, or form that I can continue to use it.
Yeah, it is. The voice banking it did feel like near impossible. Kind of awkward to do, but also, like, to your point, there's 50 ways to say the same thing, and you're not going to know the context of what's going on at that time.
Yeah.
As someone living with ALS, I know the technology can be powerful, but also emotionally strange. What do people outside this disease usually not understand about hearing your own synthetic voice?
I think that when I've talked to people about the work that I'm doing, I'm not sure that the reality really of what it means to lose the ability to speak is fully processed, I think. And so, I'm spending a lot of time right now talking to a lot of my former partners and others about the company that we're building and the impact that we're trying to have. And I'm sharing stories of people who are using Talk to Me Goose and what it means to them. And I think it's starting to set in. There's a user that just sent me a note, and she talks about being able to laugh and joke with her husband again, and the freedom that gives her to do that. And and I cry every time I read these things that users share. We built a feature in the app to allow people living with ALS who have children in their lives to create and tell stories in their own voice with the children in their lives, 8 to 10 minute bedtime stories. It was a feature that grew out of work that I did with a family that the father was living with ALS, and he had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And it struck me that his 3-year-old had never heard her father tell her a bedtime story in his own voice. And so we built this feature called the Story Builder feature in Talk to Me Goose to be able to create with a few clicks a personalized bedtime story that he can put his kids in the middle of the bedtime story to be the hero of their own story, and to be able to read it out in his voice to his kids.
That's awesome.
And what a privilege. Like, I remember when we had a godson, we just would sit around the dining room table and tell stories, make them up, chocolate cake stories, we called them. We had the talking chocolate cake who would be a detective and solve mysteries. And we just make these stories up. And this is how we made memories around the kitchen table over dinner when he was, 3 and 4 years old, having dinner with us. And to think that yes, we put the solution in the hands of Darren, and they sent me a picture with him, and it said Merlin's making him a smooth talker, and that was amazing. But to have the idea that his daughter had never heard her father tell her a bedtime story, to be able to give him that opportunity was a privilege. In his own voice, not a robotic voice. Like, that's a memory she'll carry with her forever. And the feedback when he did was that she wants Daddy to tell that story 100 times again forever. Like, that's what having a real voice means. And that's, again, why I'm doing this. And, Darren, in this case, passed away in January. And so his daughter, got to hear her father tell her a story, and we'll carry that with her, that memory with her forever. And so, to me, that's what this, synthetic voice, this voice clone integrated into the solution means for people. It's, it means connections. It means like a real bond between a father and a daughter in this case. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. For me, hearing my own voice, it means that I can actually still be me. But for so many others, it means so much more.
That question of connection also became personal at home. You built this with your wife, Anne. What did building together reveal that caregiving alone might not have?
Yeah, so Anne and I have built a lot of things together. We built a life together. We've been married 26 years this October. And it's been an amazing 26 years. And I'm grateful that we haven't actually had to get too deep into the caregiving experience, so to speak. I bristle every time she goes to take the trash out and take the cans to the curb and all of those things that I usually do. And she gets mad at me when I still go to do them. I'm still going to try to go do them regardless of whether she gets mad at me or not. I think that's just the way that I'm built. I'm sure there are things I'm going to wrestle with on that caregiving journey that I'm going to learn a lot about me and her as this evolves. She got to listen to me rant and rave about why things worked or didn't work along the way. She provided me encouragement, as she always does and has always done for the last 26 years and more before that. She's been an amazing life partner. And I really couldn't ask for anything more. What did it reveal? I don't know. It just continues to reveal how much, we've been able to accomplish together. When I was diagnosed, we said, that as a consultant, there's always three things. There are three things we're going to do, right? We're going to continue to travel. I'm going to get involved in advocacy work, and I'm going to work on this. These are the three things that I can do. And we've got more travel planned for the rest of this year. I don't know how much more I'm going to be able to do, but this year has got a couple more trips in it. I'm going to continue to advocate for as long as I still have my voice. And then we built this company, and she has got a lot of really good ideas about what we can do together, and continues to inspire me to make this the best thing that we can do. Like I said, we don't have kids, so what we're building, we're going to leave behind for others and create something sustainable. And I couldn't really ask for more than what Ann and I have built together here. So I'm sure I'll share more later in our conversation about how amazing she is, but we'll leave it at that.
That brings it back to what voice itself represents. You have said voice is like a fingerprint. When someone loses their voice, what do other people usually misunderstand about that loss?
I think this is you asked really hard questions, Tim. I think as I've prepared for this conversation, that's one thing I've appreciated about your podcast series is there truly is nothing left unsaid. This is a hard question, I think, and I think I don't know that people really truly understand what it means to lose your voice. I don't know that I truly understand what it means yet, um, because I haven't lost it. When I'm at risk still, and when I struggle at the end of the day, I feel like I run and hide. Um, uh, I have moments where my speech still slows down, and I still haven't fully grappled with what it's going to mean yet when I have lost the ability entirely. Um, like I said earlier, I think your voice is so much for me. It's so much a part of who I am. It's how I process things, and so you know, I don't know that people fully understand that. At least for many people, how much of a part of who you are your voice is, and so I think they just think it's how you communicate, and so replace it with a device, replace it with a piece of paper, find a different way to communicate. But I think it's so much more than that, and again, I don't know that I fully understand it because I haven't had to grapple with it entirely. When my speech slows down, and I can tell already I've been talking a lot today. Tonight I'm gonna run and hide. Um, it'll be something. It'll be something I'm going to grapple with here at some point in the near future. Um, Ask me again in a few months.
What decision did ALS force you to make before you were ready?
Well, I had to get off my bicycle before I was ready. I'm not entirely off my bicycle. I still get on it from time to time, but I can't ride up the hills anymore. I think I mentioned in 2023 I had the opportunity to go ride the French Alps, and it was a bucket list, if you will, to go climb Alpe d'Huez and the Galibier and Col du Glandon. And Tour de France is on right now, and it's July. It's the 3 weeks in July where I can't get anything done in the mornings, and I always wanted to go ride the mountains that they ride in the Tour de France, and I had that opportunity, and I really love suffering in the mountains and climbing those big climbs. And I think I always imagined that after I retired, I would go explore the Pyrenees and the Dolomites and, ride across the country one day. I thought I would get on my bike and ride all the way across the U.S. Well, I think those days are not going to happen. And that, this has left me to grapple with that. I live on top of Mount Washington in Pittsburgh, and the last bit to my house is a 17% hill climb. And the last time I tried it, I had to get off at the bottom of the hill and walk. And for a cyclist, there's no greater shame. so, uh, so that was hard. I still will get on my bike though as frequently as I'm able, and there's a lovely trail down by the river, and I can still at times go down and ride, and I'll pass cyclists, and I think to myself, you have no idea, as I'm zinging past them still at 15 to 20 miles an hour, and I think, I still got it. But that is the one thing that I've had to give up that hurt a little bit. But I'm still going to get out there and go as much as I can.
You are now involved in ALS advocacy and access to treatment. What is the most frustrating thing patients are still being asked to wait for?
I think we're waiting for progress. I think it's unfortunate we're waiting for progress, and we're so close to progress. And it's going to take continued and bipartisan commitment from Congress to reauthorize the legislation that sits before them right now, the Act for ALS, to fund for the next 5 years the research and the access to treatment for people living with ALS. It's why I use the resources that I have and the access that I have and the experience I have to push for that reauthorization right now. because it is so important that we put the infrastructure in place and that we give people access to the experimental treatments that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. And they don't have access to it because the way this disease progresses, 80 to 90% of people who are diagnosed with ALS don't have access to clinical trials because they simply don't qualify because of when they're diagnosed, how they're diagnosed, how long it takes to get diagnosed, and so forth. So the Act for ALS provides people the opportunity to get into those investigational trials when they otherwise wouldn't qualify. That legislation expires in September if it's not reauthorized. And so I've been spending a lot of time focused on that. And without that, our progress will stall. That funding goes to fund research. We've made great progress over the last several years. I think we're very close to finding some answers as to why this disease progresses the way that it does, what might cause it, and what we can do to slow that progression. And so, I think we are, we are unfortunately still waiting, and that is a challenge. So we need to stop waiting. We're also waiting a lot in many cases, and I spoke about this at a conference recently. We're waiting for innovation. I think health systems and others have a lot of innovation in the pipeline that they're just overly risk averse about putting out. That could help us advance in the areas of assistive technology and others that they're holding on to because they're afraid of taking a risk. And if they got out of their own way, they might actually put some innovations out that could help us in different ways with different things. And then finally, the FDA has regulatory authority to exercise more flexibility in the way that they evaluate drugs and treatments that are coming through the pipeline that sometimes I don't think they exercise. And we could benefit from that flexibility if they did exercise that authority. And so I'm spending time on that issue as well. And so, ALS doesn't wait. We shouldn't have to either. So I'm spending an awful lot of time on those issues. Thank you for asking that question.
I have found a lot of stability in my own life through faith in Jesus, and I am always interested in how others think about faith. Has faith, in whatever form it takes for you, changed since the diagnosis?
Yeah, Tim, I was not raised in a household where we participated in organized religion as I was growing up. And I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and I think that being said, I think the values in my household that have stuck with me, throughout my entire life, those of empathy for others, respect, showing kindness to everyone, recognizing that all of us are going through this life, experiencing things that, none of us know what each of us are going through at times. And we have to show each other grace accordingly. All of that, I think, has become a lot clearer to me, I think, in the last 18 months or so. Empathy is a word that has always been important to me. And in fact, it's a word that, it's a concept that I did a peer-reviewed study on, the value in some respects of empathy in the healthcare setting. It was published in 2021 because it was something that really mattered to me. And I was very curious about, were systems that were inherently more empathetic, better performing. And, I believe today that that's true. And I think empathy, towards one another as human beings, empathy within an organization towards the people that work in that organization, towards the people that organization serves, is, speak to the value that that organization can create. And I think when I was diagnosed, you know, these things, this empathy, this kindness, this respect for others, this, showing of grace, all of these things sort of have shown up for me in different ways that matter. And in maybe in bigger ways, and if you can call that faith, maybe, um, I'm much more attuned to the struggles that people have. I'm much more aware of what people are going through. Um, much more cognizant of people that are using wheelchairs. I'm much more cognizant of people that are, using a walker. Much more cognizant of people that are, going through things um, that I see, and maybe even seeing people that are experiencing things that I empathize with. Maybe much more profoundly now than I was before. And as I built the app, I think I have been much more cognizant of how inherently difficult navigating this world is for people who live with disabilities. And it's made me much more aware of what we need to be thinking about as we build solutions that are inherently, if you will, empathetic to those needs. So, does that mean that, you know, I can't speak to my faith per se because I don't know exactly how I would define that for me. But for me, I think a lot about those things that matter. Am I showing grace to others? Am I showing kindness to others? Am I showing respect to others? Am I truly being empathetic to what people are experiencing? And those things have mattered to me all my life. But over the last 18 months, I think I've become more cognizant of them, and they've been more profound for me. And at the end of the day, my father, I haven't talked a lot about my dad, but I lost him 25 years ago, and he played a really important role in my life. You know, he he was always someone who, I always thought he was always there when I was growing up, and my mom always said he was always on the road. Um, my mom says he traveled for work all the time, and I thought he was always at my games. He was always at my practices. He was always behind the backstop when I was playing. My mom said he was always gone. I have no recollection of him being gone. Um, so I think that speaks to who he was as a father, because he did both of those things well. Um, and when my mom says he was always gone, it wasn't that as a complaint. It was just that's what he did for work. And he was always there for me. And, these are the things that I'm speaking about now, the empathy, the kindness, the respect that he taught me as a kid that mattered, that the choices I made have consequences, and that I needed to think about other people when I make a choice. So there's a long-winded answer to your really important question, Tim. I don't know if I'm giving a good one, but I think I've thought a lot about these things over the last 18 months. And I guess as someone who's facing this diagnosis, I get to think about these things a lot. So that's where my head is right now.
David, before we close, I always ask our guests to brag about their family for a minute. David, please go ahead.
Yeah, I stifled my answer earlier when we got to talking about Anne, because I knew you were going to ask this one later. So my wife, Anne Mundell, is an amazing artist. She spent 33 years on the faculty at Carnegie Mellon, retired as a full professor, and is now a professor emerita in scene design. And she taught countless students in the practice of scene design and scenic art over her career. And she retired after having served as the head of the School of Drama for a year, in a time when the school was going through a significant turmoil during the pandemic. when every university, I think, was going through significant turmoil. And so she retired as a significant leader coming out of that period, and continues to design and professionally and do art around the country. She has an Instagram under her full name, Ann_Mundell. I hope I got that right. And she has a hashtag that she uses, draw every day, and she tries to draw something every day. And she often gets people reaching out asking if she sells her artwork. She does not sell her artwork. And if you ask to buy her artwork, you might just have some sent to you for free. She's incredibly talented. She's an amazing storyteller. And she's just a wonderful person who I couldn't have asked to be put next to for this journey that I'm on. So that's a little bit about Anne. I mentioned a little bit about my dad. My dad was a very hardworking guy from Kansas who never went to college, but spent 2 years, 9 months, and 13 days in the Army and couldn't get out soon enough, but then worked his way up through the telephone company from a guy in the switch room to retire after 28 years, and then unfortunately passed away from lung cancer, but seemed to instill in me a good work ethic and some good values that led to my success. I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and I couldn't be prouder of what he did with his career. And he and my mom, raised 2 kids and seemed to do a pretty good job at it. And my mom lives in Phoenix and is still, making her way in the world. Like I said, doing her road trips with her girlfriends as a fireball, living it up as a feisty 80-year-old. She'll probably kill me for saying how old she is, but she's headed off to Japan with us in September, and I love to spend time with her, despite all of her stories and her retelling of the same stories. But I have a great family, Tim.
You mentioned a couple of times you're being at Deloitte. How do you think you get a place like Deloitte to get behind and support ALS, or get them more involved with ALS, or are they already and we're just not hearing about it?
Yeah, Deloitte is a big place. So I have been, as a firm, they don't typically get behind necessarily any one issue. As a group of partners, they've been amazing. And they've gotten behind me in particular and supported me as an individual and the causes that I've gotten involved in. And so they've quietly, as individuals, supported the Live Like Lou Foundation with contributions to the cause that they've supported us in getting the app out to people living with ALS in North America. Well, I would love to get them as a firm behind the cause a bit more solidly. It is a giant machine, and getting them behind any one thing has been more than the firm does in general, Troy. Just to have it said, not for lack of trying.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid-fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
I think I'm going to say 2. Well, obviously, the day that I got married to Anne, certainly a happy day. But then there was one moment that comes to mind. Very near the end of my dad's life, I was selected for a project that I won to go to the World Winter Games for the Special Olympics, and for a prize that we won. And I came back from that, visited my father, and I handed him the plaque that we were awarded. And I remember vividly the look on his face, as he was still struggling really at that point with some tumors in his brain to kind of process everything. But the look on his face, I'll never forget, as he looked up at me, and I could just see the pride in his face and his eyes, even as he was still struggling to process what was going on. And I'll never forget that.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
Well, I feel like I'm on a bit of an adversity train right now. So kind of an unfair advantage right now. But I told a friend of mine that I feel like I've been training for this my entire life. I I'm a two-time Ironman, and I took on the 7-day stage race in the Alps. I like to do hard things um, for the specific purpose of just doing hard things to know where the boundaries are, and so that when you run into hard things, you know that you can overcome them. And so I think when this diagnosis came, I said to my friend, actually at the partner meeting, I've been preparing all my life for this. So I think this is the biggest adversity that I faced, and I will overcome it.
My dad has this line, Dad, not to speak for you, but he says that the best training for ALS was playing in the NFL. You just wake up every day and battle.
What are you most excited about?
We started this company, and we are in the early formation stage, and we have hired a phenomenal CEO who is about to take the helm in the next month, and we're building a team, and we've got just a lot of opportunity ahead of us to make an impact, getting the solution out to people who need it, not just here in the U.S. but around the world. And um, I could not, I cannot believe the caliber of the team that we're building, and we'll be making an announcement in the next several weeks about who's joining us, and um, handing the company off to a new leadership team who will be able to sustain this business in the long run is incredibly exciting. Super excited about that.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, you know what? Don't get bogged down in the little things. Like everything works out in the end. I think sometimes we get caught up in worrying about what other people think about you, and are trying to like play a part at times. And I think I did that for a little while early in my career, and um, it slows things down. Actually, just be your authentic self, and don't worry about what other people think. Don't worry about the little things. Do the things that matter, and everything else takes care of itself.
Do you have any book recommendations for us or for the listeners?
I do. There are two. I really love The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. I think that's his name. But it really was a good book for me to read at the time. It helped me understand why I like to do hard things. It helped me understand that we tend to spend too much of our time being comfortable, and it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Helped me understand the difference between discomfort and pain, and it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I have a feeling I'm going to be a bit uncomfortable at times, and getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is important. And it was part of why I decided to take on the challenge I took on in 2023, is to push myself as far as I could and outside of my comfort zone on the bike as much as I was able to, was because of that book. And then the second one, a little closer to home here. There's a great book by a person living with ALS called Bed Sores and Bliss, Finding Fullness of Life with a Terminal Diagnosis, by Hannah Duplessis. She unfortunately passed away in February of this year. She lived not far from me here in Pittsburgh. And the last chapter of that is called 5 Stars, and it's just a wonderful book where she outlines, in the last chapter, she outlines kind of her philosophy of life living with this disease, and it's really resonated with me. And it's a short read. It's available online, and it's a great book.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
The only thing I'll say, Tim and Troy, is, again, it's been a privilege to be on with you two. I've watched a number of your podcasts. I've listened to a number of them. I think you all really do ask some of the best questions. And I think as I've navigated the latter stages of my career, I found that the best conversations come about from the best questions. And I've appreciated the opportunity to be here with you today, and spend some time answering your questions. So thank you.
Before we let you go, I always ask our guests, who are a couple of people that you know personally you think we should have on as future guests?
So two people that I think you should talk to, and then we'll be done. Two people. One is John Connie. So John Connie is an amazing actor. He played Rafiki in The Lion King and T'Chaka in Black Panther. And he is the co-author of, or co-playwright with Ethel Fugard of Sizwe Bansi is Dead. And he was raised in South Africa, Johannesburg, or he lived in Johannesburg, and he was persecuted during the apartheid government for the plays that he wrote. And he left the South Africa and he came to the U.S. And when he got back, he was actually chased and beaten and left for dead by the police. And he was saved only through the kindness of a physician who hid him in a hospital in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and saved his life. I had the privilege to have dinner with him in 2013 and hear his stories, and his stories are just unbelievable about life, about apartheid, about Nelson Mandela, about the whole time period. And he's just an amazing storyteller. Anyway, I could get you in touch with him because he would be an amazing storyteller to just spend some time with. The dinner was unbelievable. And then on a completely different note would be our former chair from Deloitte, Janet Foudy, who's just this amazing female leader, led, the world's largest U.S. professional services firm, wrote a book on female leadership, Arrive and Thrive. She did. She was the CEO of consulting, went on to be the chair of the board, is now working with Gina Raimondo and Eric Holcomb, the former governor of Indiana and the past Secretary of Commerce of the U.S., Gina Raimondo, to found this organization called Raise US, helping to transition the U.S. workforce into the AI economy, and is just an amazing leader and phenomenal speaker as well. And I think would be a very different conversation from the John Connie conversation, but another good one about what's going on with the U.S. economy right now and with the American workforce would be an interesting conversation to have. But two people I think would be fascinating discussions for nothing left unsaid.
Yeah, those are both great ones.
David, thank you for joining us. Your story brings together health, care, technology, family, voice, and the reality of living with limited time. What you have built is not just an app. It is a way for people to stay present with the people they love and to keep part of themselves intact when so much is being taken away. We appreciate your time, your honesty, and the work you are doing for families facing ALS. May God bless you and your family.
And you as well, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, David. This is great.